I really can't decide which is better, the spooky season or Christmas time. I guess I don't have to. See, I watch horror movies and play creepy games all year round, and I constantly give gifts to people. It's Halloween and Christmas every day at my place. Anyhow, I always itch to play some horror during October, so now it's time I give you a few things to chew on before the 31st. With that being said, I'm going to avoid the more obvious choices like a Resident Evil or Silent Hill, even if they're always good picks. So here we go. Once upon a time, it used to be weird to love Nightmare Before Christmas, and now it feels like every normie and her grandma is into it. I mean, what's gonna be hot next? Corpse Bride? Well, never mind then. If you aren't aware, there's actually a very competent sequel to the movie in video game form, though it is stuck on PS2 and Xbox unless you emulate it. You can't even upscale it on the series, let alone play it on the 360 because of that pesky license. Now, it's a not-so-hidden secret that the game plays like a simplified Devil May Cry. But simple does not necessarily mean easy. Some enemies really come at you. What I mean is that there aren't many moves Jack can pull off, and with that, be ready to hear a lot of repeated call-outs of his main whip attack, again and again. That repetitiveness unfortunately carries over in the OST, with a remix version of This Is Halloween that sounds good for the first 20 minutes, playing over and over and over and over and over until you mute the thing. One thing about the soundtrack that actually slayed is the fact that with every big boss fight, there's new music with singing lines and all. And I mean, they go hard. There's a Finkelstein song, a new Oogie Boogie song, a fast-paced remix of Sally, and a ton more. Honestly, that's the main draw for me. But the world is also really well crafted. Every map genuinely feels realized in a way that's faithful and interesting. And we get to see things that were in the movie for just seconds in all of its Gen 6 glory. It's also notable that most of the original voices are in this, but there is no Catherine O'Hara, so Sally does feel a bit out of the loop. This was also one of the first times that Chris Sarandon, the original voice of Jack, gets to sing instead of Danny Elfman. So that's pretty cool, because now he almost always covers that on stage plays. This is also somewhat of a sentimental pick for me, seeing as my oldest cousin was absolutely obsessed with this game after playing Kingdom Hearts' take on Halloween Town. That man was absolutely dedicated, playing day in and out until he beat it. Because of him, I ended up buying it as one of my first Xbox games in a long-gone disc replay. Again, I have to warn you that the gameplay sometimes has stupid one-hit kills or traps, and that the combat isn't something AAA. But if you like the movie and the millions of purchasable merchandise in the world, check this game out. It goes for a pretty steep 45 or so on PlayStation 2, but a much more reasonable 25 on Xbox. Before we move on, though, I have to take a moment of silence for Ken Page, Oogie's voice actor who passed away on September 30th. He brought this character to life in an epic way, and I know generations of people are grateful for that. Just as I started capturing footage for the games in this video, I came across a $1.99 sale for a game on the Switch eShop called Homebody. It usually goes for $20, but I'd never heard of it, so I looked up a few things and ended up snatching it up. I really don't want to spoil much, because the game definitely goes in a philosophical and emotional direction that genuinely touched me. But it starts off with a typical contrivance of you and a few friends ending up in a house that a killer bursts into. The thing is, your friends seem to not be slightly affected by this. Instead, they're more weary of you, and not whatever weird thing you're trying to tell them is imminent. This game has a very simple but effective graphical style, and its UI is very streamlined, even allowing you to toggle whether it shows you what's interactable, which I always appreciate in adventure games. It's mostly a puzzle solver, and there's a good variety in that aspect, but once the killer's in the house, the vibe is very much more like a clock tower type deal, where you run and hide between rooms. While the puzzles in horror are very well paced and effective, I was the most invested in the main character, Emily, and how her interactions with people felt so real and how anxious and uncomfortable she was. For a fairly short game, her development is really well done, and honestly, all the characters become very human rather quickly. I also can't skip over the fact that the developers took a second to make their own little NES console functional and playable in the game. I recommend Homebody greatly. It's a very underrated game, even after some irritating puzzle moments. But hey, we've got YouTube. As of right now, there is no physical release, just digital on a multitude of consoles and PC. This may be the oddest on the list, but because Alien Romulus came out this summer, I've been thinking about Alien vs. Predator. And then a bolt of lightning hit me. I've got a copy of AVP on PS3 right on my shelf. I got it at release, so probably in 2010, and it was mostly my dad's game because I always got frustrated with the controls at the time. Being real, the controls are still janky. You use R1 or R2 for attacks, which is definitely awkward in today's standards, but I forgive it, because you get to play as a predator, and a xenomorph. I was really getting into it for the first 30 minutes, wondering why I never did more in the past, but then I ran into pretty vague objective screens and remembered that irritation all while getting motion sick for the first-person view. I guess I'm old, and probably decrepit. But after popping Dramamine pills, I went back in and started ripping heads off left and right. This is absolutely the kind of game you play for a few mindless hours and then don't come back for a long time, if ever, but it's a good time killer. You get to hop around as both types of aliens, going invisible or spitting acid on command. It's fantasy fulfillment, and it's more my style than any Hitman game could ever be. There is a story, too. I was interested in the Alien Weyland Corp side of it, but felt nothing about the Predator stuff. And I almost forgot. You get to play as the Colonial Marines without playing the god-awful buggy game of the same name. So that's just another reason to play AVP instead. But if you're looking for multiplayer, the story mode is solo only. And then there was online multiplayer for 2 to 12 people. But guess what? There's still servers online. The only issue would be finding randos trying to log on. But if you have online friends, force them into it, because there are scary maps on top of fanfic levels of battles to get into. If you're trying to buy this game, it's on the PS3, 360, and PC. It goes for an easy 14 or so complete on PS3, 15 on Steam, and even less on the 360. The most unsettling game on this list is easily World of Horror, a game that's available on a ton of consoles, and it seemed to have generated a good bit of hype when the physical release started hitting shelves in 2023. This game was a deeply loved passion project by a very small group of people, with the main developer working on it part-time while working as a dentist. He goes by Panstaz online, and is responsible for programming and designing the art style in MS Paint. There are obvious artistic connections to Junji Ito in some of the monster designs, and the late 80s Japanese folktale stories served to us on an old computer monitor really sets us in this universe. Honestly, looking at the game's art alone is enough of a sell for most people. It's astounding how much detail is on screen at all times. Cassandra Kaw wrote the game's multiple scenarios, and all of them feel interesting without being predictable. There are even multiple endings the game encourages you to seek out. I was also surprised by just how many options you have to choose from during each scenario. Like, you almost always have a choice to avoid combat, sneak around somehow, or go right into the thick of it. There's just so much variety. Arc of Dream and Questa are the composers for the game's rather charming PC-98-like music that feels incredibly of the time, without letting those restrictions hold them back. No track felt repetitive, and that's great news. Here's my few complaints when it comes to the Switch port that I played. It should have had touchscreen controls, and I say that while knowing the D-pad worked fine, but there are times I wanted to be able to hit something with inputs faster, and the D-pad locked up on me. It's also a bit more buggy on Switch, with my save not actually saving 2 times, as well as an occasional screen tear here and there. Because of the save issue alone, I would have to recommend you play it on one of the other consoles, knowing it probably plays best on PC. But if you do want to own a physical copy, it's about $40 on the Switch, both online and at Best Buy. While there is no North American PS4 copy, you can buy a multilingual version on PlayAsia. There are also tons of art cards inside of these cases, so that's a really nice bonus to buying physical. If you're into horror, or you just straight up like adventure games, this is a must-play. As for our last game, I have not personally played much outside of helping with obstacles, let alone finished it, because this was a game I gifted to a friend of the channel, Amanda. The game is called Death or Treat, and it exudes Halloween too much for me to leave it out. She begged me to buy this game last year and played it for only 20 minutes, and of course she gave up on it, go figure. So this year, knowing I was making this video, I forced her into playing, and this is the footage you're seeing. She, definitely feels the struggle, as you can see. To be fair, she's gotten so much more invested in it now and plans to keep going, which is really saying something. Death Retreat is like baby's first hack-and-slash platformer that attempts to be a little bit of a roguelike, where you die, get sent back to the home base, and start again with some new additions to your arsenal. There are also tons of things to collect, which is how you get a lot of the better weapons later on. I did notice that the upgrades required a lot of item collection though, and sometimes that can kill my want for certain items, so keep that under your hat if you're looking to get all the weapons. Outside of that, the game is not especially complicated, nor does it have too much to challenge you with besides some well-designed monsters and settings. What I noticed while watching and playing is that the jumping feels really good, with not too much float or bounciness, but it demands excellent timing to get over obstacles and enemies. It reminded me a bit of PS1 Crash, but with a better sense of where you'll actually land. Now, I have heard that at times, especially on the Switch, some of the AI does not react right, and if you hit them from behind, they don't always turn around like they should, making it a much easier game when you know that tidbit. There are also weapons later that apparently can fly right through enemy hitboxes, having you miss them when you're literally going all the way into them. I haven't seen that happen yet on my end, so there's a chance it has been debugged. The big takeaway of this game is actually the 2D style, with touches of hand-drawn animation. Color choice is everything in this thing, and there's some striking items that really pop out at you when they need to, while subduing the other things appropriately. The music is also good, not looping tirelessly, and really fitting into the Halloween theme with chimes and orchestral instruments. It's about a 7-hour experience if you're really busting through it, and closer to 30 if you're trying to get every little secret and weapon. To buy it, it's either 40 or so on Switch, about 30 on PS4, and the cheapest, probably the best optimized option, is at 20 on PS5. This is also a game that comes with a cute little postcard inside the case, so that's a boon to owning it physically if you're into that. That concludes the list, so let me know what your favorite October games are down below. Thank you again for watching.